Elizabeth, this is wonderful to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
For several reasons. The sessions, as we try to reach several different musicians and people involved in the music industry, we try to bring out opportunities that are available for the next generation to see and learn from great people that move the industry forward. And there are artists that we've had that have been wonderful to hear. They're on stage doing it, but you really are kind of behind the scene, promoting and developing public relations for artists and big name artists to help them go to this next level. Now, you came from a family of art and great magic. So what got you involved in music and what got you involved in public relations?
It's not a short answer, but I'll try and make it one. I've been raised by artists. I was always in the arts and visual arts. My parents are painters and sculptors, and my uncle's a photographer, and I was surrounded by visual art. But music was my passion since I was very little. My first concert was Dionne Warwick. She was my favorite. That was in the 60s, the Apollo. My taste is very eclectic, and it always has been. So it was rock and roll, it was R&B, it was, widespread. And music was my best friend growing up. It was what I looked forward to, it was what understood me, it was the person I poured my heart to, and it was the one that understood. So that was from the get-go. I studied visual art in college. I was a professional tapestry weaver in New Mexico. When I moved back to New York, that's when my music career began. I first started DJing. I did freelance DJing. I was hired by someone called the Party Master. I worked at a record store. I interned at a recording studio. I swept the floors for $10 a shift. I had an insatiable appetite to know everything about this industry, and no job wasn't fun to me. And that's still true for me, actually. Everything's interesting to me. I felt that same way in college. I opened the curriculum, was like, oh man, I want to do all of this. But I very much feel that way about the music industry. One thing led to another, and I went through the spines on all my records. And the things I had the most of were Atlantic, Elektra, and Geffen. And in those years, which is 1987, all of those were at 75 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. So I wrote out a resume, silver pen on black velvet, and I went to every floor and I dropped my resume with each secretary. And when I got on the elevator between floors, one man said to me, "You know that's going straight in the trash." And he said, "Go to 24 and ask for Virginia and say Chris sent you." So I did, and that was the temp agency that serviced the whole building. So I took a typing test. I passed, which surprised me, and the next day I was working at Atlantic Records. And my first temp job turned into a permanent job. And from Atlantic Records, I got hired by Geffen Records, who was in the same building. And I went from the inventory department in Atlantic Records to the A&R department in Geffen, where I was a secretary for the head of A&R. But I was the only secretary. The office had just opened. So there were 5 heads. There was PR. There was Mr. Geffen's personal assistant, Sandy Giorgio, lovely woman, head of promotions for radio, my boss, Michael Rosenblatt at Geffen, and that was it. So I got to know about everything. I would volunteer to clean up the promotions office because I wanted to see and know absolutely everything. I helped out in every department I could. This is also the time when I got sober. So as my career was ascending, I was descending into addiction. And thank God for Geffen. They were marvelous when I got sober. And I made that a priority in my life. And the music industry is a wonderful industry to get sober in. It's also a wonderful industry to get not sober in. But that was 30 years ago almost. So, I've had a great journey. So that's when I pivoted from being in A&R to moving into publicity. After I had some time in sobriety, I went back out into the music industry and started interviewing in a different, kind of slightly different area. And a public relations firm, God bless them, hired me.
Boy, this is an amazing journey of not only a business journey where you really had courage and pursued as a female in this business. It's not easy. But you pursued and you kept that going. And then the other side, on the personal side, you really went through personal challenges that really brought you to a higher level of understanding of just the spirituality of what life is about. This is deep wisdom that you experienced in the process. Really, really amazing. So in 1994 is when you started your own business?
Yeah, so I went into public relations in 1989, and the firm that I worked for was working with Ringo and Paul McCartney and David Bowie, ZZ Top, and more. And I worked with them for 5 years, and after 5 years I decided I wanted to leave. And actually, to be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to be in that firm anymore. But I loved the musicians I represented. I really enjoyed it. I just still felt like maybe I want to do something else. Within a week, I had Ringo Starr, Linda McCartney, UB40, and Robert Palmer.
Explain about PR, what you do with PR, what public relations, what exactly do you do for these artists?
Honestly, it can vary. It depends how big the team is and how specific their goals are. But the short of it is, in public relations, you are the middle person between the public, the artist, and the media. So you are that middle ground that, in a way, you're the conduit of the things that they make, their art, and bringing it into the public domain. So it's a really important place to be. Because it's how the public learn about what the artist has been working on. So if someone's working on an album, you're the one that helps put together a press release, decides where in the media to send it. So how to introduce that into the public forum.
So you really have a huge responsibility in delivering this artist's life and soul is what it really is. Working with someone like Ringo, so what would you do for someone like Ringo? I mean, Ringo's still traveling, still hitting the road. We've had interviews with Greg Bissonette, who's traveling with him constantly. What would you do for someone like Ringo?
With Ringo, you're going to draft a press release. You're going to figure out where, at what outlet you want that, how to disseminate that information.
Okay. You want your reach to be as wide as you can to get that information out to as many people in the process. Like, obviously, that's what you're doing.
You know, here's the thing. The Beatles wrote the book on all of us. The Beatles, the Stones, the Animals. When I first started in public relations, Ringo knew everything about doing a press conference, and I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. But what I did learn along the way is that if you have a piece of paper with some information on it, that information is important, it's news, but how do you pivot? How do you engage people to want to receive that information? That's where you have to have some synergy. And that isn't, that's part of the creativity of the job. And Ringo has been the best teacher in the world. You know, the Beatles were masters at it. Neil Aspinall, my gosh, managed the Beatles company forever, started with them at the very beginning. He and Mal Evans were their only two roadies. Right. So that's who Neil Aspinall is. And as the company Apple grew, so did his relationship with them, and he ran Apple.
And then he got you involved with Apple.
He did get me involved with Apple in around 95.
Right.
Neil Aspinall asked me to represent the Beatles company in 1995, or just thereafter. And sitting in his office one day, he showed me a book of drawings he'd done. And I hadn't realized how creative he was. And I said, "My God, Neil, you're an artist." And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, "Of course I'm an artist." He said, "The Beatles only work with artists."
Interesting.
And so, yeah, it was an interesting...
So your background with your parents kind of really laid the groundwork for the direction of what you're in right now.
Exactly, because I didn't study public relations in college. Right. I studied visual art. I studied art history. I studied political science. That's what interested me in terms of studying. I listened to music, but I didn't study music.
Interesting. Were there any instruments specifically that you lean towards to enjoy?
I love guitar.
Interesting.
I play it very badly, but I enjoy it.
So now you move on, you have EFPR, you've got your name involved with it. Then you change the name years later to Beautiful Day Media. What happened with the change of the name?
I wanted it to be bigger than my name. I wanted it to be something that could be more inclusive with Beautiful Day Media, it stands on its own. It has its own energy. It invites other energy to it. Elizabeth Freund PR is all about me. It's also not a very creative name. So I wanted to transform it and grow it.
How were you inspired to get the name?
There was a record I loved in the 70s called It's a Beautiful Day, and it's a beautiful album cover with a woman in this long dress and a big blue sky, and it just felt delicious to me. So that's what inspired it.
Are there, in public relations, and there are many people that will be watching this that will want to be involved at some point in public relations, is there advice that you have for younger generation on what they should be prepared to be involved in public relations? What does it take to really do it?
Curiosity, creativity, passion. I don't think you have to study public relations, but public relations as a career, as an industry, has grown tremendously. I mean, I've been in it now 20 plus 30 years, and it's changed a lot. So the courses are offering in college didn't exist when I was there. So I don't know from that point of view. Perhaps there's lots to be gained, knowledge, but since we're talking specifically about the music industry and not public relations as it would relate to toothpaste,
Right.
which is a much more narrow and specific, almost scientific approach, like advertising.
Right.
Public relations, the way I've lived it, is dealing with artists. And managers too. Managers are highly creative people, at least the ones that I've had the privilege of knowing. They're quirky and passionate and like artists. So it's about personalities and it's about passion.
Interesting. Personality, passion, and dedication. Those are qualities that you see, having to have involved with public relations. So now let's go to the other side. Let's talk about, what do you see in an artist that you want to work with? What qualities in an artist that you see that you say, wow, this is someone that I really believe in and I want to work with? And you've worked with literally some of the greatest artists in the history of music. What is it that you've pulled from them that you've seen that's made it fun to work with them?
The same qualities, actually, honestly. All of the artists that I've represented had no interest in public relations. They had interest in making music. And it's all they've ever wanted to do, and that's why they still do it. Every time they get asked that question, why are you still doing it? You've made money, and because that's what I do. And that draws me in. I'm thrilled to watch artists at work. And I have to love what they do. I can't represent an album that doesn't touch my heart. All the artists that I've had the privilege, it's a huge privilege, to work with and get to know, they have passion, authenticity, integrity. They do it because they love it, because they have to do it. They will do it until they die, in that way, because they just have to keep making music. And maybe it won't always be in the public forum, but those that are creative throughout their whole lives. So that's what I look for. And whether it's an artist who's worldwide famous, or it's an artist who wants to be worldwide famous, the criteria for me is the same.
Fantastic. So really what it comes down to is that, the industry as it was and as it is now, how do you see a comparison for where the industry was years ago to where it is now? Has it changed? Is it changing? Where do you see it going?
Changing constantly, and I wish I could tell you where it was going. I think people will always make music. So that part is secure. How they afford to make music is what's in jeopardy. And I don't have the answer. I wish I did, because I think it's an exciting time. One of the things that I've loved about the internet and all these programs, people can be making music out of their garage, out of their homes, on their computers, is that it's been a great equalizer. Because before we had a very narrow little, a tiered system through which only a certain few were able to kind of eke out. And sometimes it was based on the quality of their music. And that's great. And I don't think that will change. But sometimes it was based on star makers, on money, on payola, when radio, you could pay for number one. It's not so much about that anymore. You can't really do that anymore. The internet's been the great equalizer, but it's also robbed people of a way of making money on their own music, and that's terrible. So, everyone's kind of finding their way.
So it's still in this shift.
It's very much in the shift.
But there are still many opportunities for young kids today that we didn't have years ago.
Huge.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get on YouTube. Look at the platforms people have. It's phenomenal. And I think that part's kind of exciting. And I also think it's exciting for artists because Ringo's a good example. He loves Twitter. He can speak directly to his fans. Artists didn't have that opportunity before. They had to go through the media to reach their fans. And now they don't. So it's also been an interesting equalizer in terms of the importance of media. Somebody wants to tell their fans they're going to go on the road, they can just tell their fans they're going to go on the road. So it's an interesting time.
What a direct line they have nowadays.
Yeah.
You're here for the sessions, and we're in Pennsylvania, and we'll be sitting in front of university tomorrow with hundreds of students to let them kind of see all the different areas of the music industry. And what you bring to the table with PR is so incredibly wonderful because it gives them an opportunity to see backstage of what helps move this machine forward. What would you say to, in closing, Elizabeth, what would you say to young students who are going to be watching this for many, many years to come? What would you say to them as far as where the music industry is at and what qualities they need to really pursue public relations?
I would say they need passion, they need determination, they need to feel like they can't imagine doing anything else. For me, I need to be near music. I need to be involved in music. I have the same reaction that probably artists do when they're making their art, that sense of utter belonging and purpose. I love it.
Boy, I can absolutely feel and sense your passion. And that is so invigorating to hear and feel for the music industry from yesterday, from today, and where it will be tomorrow. On behalf of the Sessions, Elizabeth, we thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful,
It's a pleasure
great.
talking to you.
Thanks.